So this was actually happening in North Korea.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you point a camera at the Earth from 600 kilometers above the surface, it's pretty mesmerizing. But point it at
The night light.
the Korean Peninsula and you'll see this. South Korea is ablaze, but North Korea is almost totally dark. You've got this little point here for Pyongyang, the capital, but it's mostly a void. The black void
It's dark the entire time.
tells a story of how the 25 million people live in this secretive kingdom of North Korea. But as the sun rises, we get to fill in the details, we get to see more. We get to see cities designed to control. We get to see an unfathomable amount of military installations, many of them burrowed into mountains, where they protect nuclear weapons, where the over 1 million soldiers endlessly prepare for war.
There's over 10,000 manned military installations. So air defense, bases, naval sites, all that squeezed into Pennsylvania.
We see factories, lots of factories. We see these little islands of dense
It's in Pennsylvania.
housing, which are the homes of the workers who are assigned here. We see barriers, lots of barriers. Barriers meant to keep people in. And not just on the borders with neighbors, but also within the country itself. Checkpoints and barriers between provinces. I've been looking at every inch of North Korea because I want to understand how it actually works. I want to understand how the all-powerful leaders have designed this place and why. And I've been stumbling upon stuff that I never thought I'd see in North Korea. Ski resorts, an international children's camp, lots and lots of water slides, markets where people buy and sell things, schools and fields, fruit factories.
It is a country, so they will
coal
develop some.
shipments, limestone mines, burial grounds, prison camps in the cities and the mountains. Lots of strange-looking buildings, stadiums and tracks and sports fields, empty roads and empty squares, Christian churches, a turtle-shaped building, apartment blocks where rich people live. You stumble upon some pretty wild stuff when you just scour every inch
That seems normal for every country ever.
the satellite map. I've also been talking to experts who spend their time looking at the map of North Korea, analyzing it day by day for decades. Their data has been really useful in all of this, and honestly I'm starting to see North Korea in a totally different way. I think I've been exposed to a very specific version of this country, and that doesn't mean it's an inaccurate version, but it's just one version. Today I want to show you a deeper version. Now the map can't tell us everything, but I'm seeing how it can fill in the blanks in my knowledge of how this country actually works, broadening my perspective on this most secretive kingdom in our world. So buckle up and let's get ready to look at this map. This whole country is under one giant surveillance. And I guess while we're talking about surveillance, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, which has a lot to do with surveillance, because all of us are actually surveilled. First things first, North Korea is a beautiful country.
North Korea is usually viewed as, this hellscape of a place, but it's actually really beautiful. Lots of mountains and hills and rare animals and everything.
It's home to this huge mountain range. Among these rugged mountains, you've got this volcano, Mount Paektu. It's kind of a sacred spot for North Koreans. It's where their legends say their great leader Kim Jong-il was born. Incidentally, it's right on this border, actually. Half of Mount Paektu is on the Chinese side. China, North Korea. North Korea can get really cold and snowy. It's home to between 20 and 30 million people. It's about half as many as live in South Korea. And it was the war in the
I wonder how many people come up there to cross the border.
1950s that created these two Koreas, and in the process turned what is now North Korea into dust. Today, North Korea is built around a few major cities. Here's the 10 most populous. Some have ports, some are up on the border with China, and then there's this river city of Pyongyang. This is the capital. A lot of this had to be redesigned from scratch because the country was destroyed in the Korean War. The country itself is designed in line with this North Korean communist ideology of a human body. The great leader is the brain, and then the members of his single-party government represents the nervous system that connects his will to the masses. The masses are the bones and the muscle, the ones who carry out the work of building this country.
So, dictatorship.
The country is supposed to act as one, serving the will of the brain, the great leader. And what I'm seeing is that this kind of body configuration allows them to do some pretty unique things. First and foremost, military. Most countries spend like between 1% and 4% of their GDP on military. North Korea spends like between 20 and 25% of their GDP on their military. And we've got the data on what that looks like. Whoa, okay, settle down, big boy. Oh God. Look at this. Oh my lord, look at this. I don't think I've ever seen so many yellow push pins in my life. It kind of reminds me of that map of like saunas in Finland. Places like a fortress. You can see that a lot of this is concentrated down here on their southern border. This is the DMZ. It's actually
he's kind of zooming out a lot, so
4-kilometer thick border. And technically within this 4 kilometers, there's supposed to be no military stuff. That is, if you don't count the thousands of landmines that are there left over from the Korean War and that North Korea continues to plant. But in terms of weapons, most of it is right here on the border of the DMZ, where North Korea has 900 artillery guns that are aimed right at Seoul, South Korea. In the event of a conflict, these guns could fire 10,000 rounds a minute at South Korea, which would make good on their promise to turn South Korea into a sea of fire, which they often make towards their southerly neighbor. Now, a reminder, it's not just North Korea. If we were mapping American or South Korean military assets, you'd see a lot of those too on the southern side, down here. But we are looking at North Korea right now. You got underground bunkers, missile launch sites, nuclear reactors.
What is that? Headset? BR headset?
Airstrips, naval bases. So you've got the thousands of landmines, and of course this little pavilion where soldiers from both sides stand meters apart. This is where the countries have their diplomatic talks. You've got 1,000 observation posts, 300 checkpoints and roadblocks, tons of military facilities that support the soldiers here. And then of course, tunnels. Man, you're gonna see a lot of underground stuff here. North Korea is covered with these things, and this is just the ones we know of. One explanation for these tunnels is that during the Korean War, this country was basically flattened. Almost every building was turned to dust by American bombs. So a huge part of the North Korean psyche is this paranoid fear of air power. They designed their defense strategy to be ready for if that ever happens again. So you have a lot of these fortified bases and tunnels. Some of them are for weapons storage, and some of them are for invasion. Like down here on the DMZ, they secretly dug a bunch of tunnels that are kilometers long that go under the DMZ. This would allow them to move troops into South Korea very quickly. Actually went into one of these tunnels that had been discovered by South Korea. But these tunnels also have another purpose. And in fact, the military itself, a big portion of it, is dedicated to protecting one family. You'll see this in the capital. This is the barracks that houses some of the 100,000 bodyguards meant to protect the Kim family. This hill is like a giant bunker. It's home to a bunch of military installations, some of them deep underground, a lot of them connected through tunnels. And this is one of the many escape
nuclear bunker
plans that the Kim family has in case of an attack. They can escape on an armored train or in one of the helicopters that is stored inside of this hill. There's rumors that there is another huge tunnel system on the northern border that would allow the Kims to sneak into China if they needed to.
Just the amount of effort put into the security of the Kims themselves versus, helping out your average person. I don't think people really realize the amount of security infrastructure that they have.
But it's not all underground. The country is littered with 1,500 guns and missiles that are meant for shooting down aircraft. A third of those, by the way, are concentrated around Pyongyang, the capital. Like, look at this one. Pretty funky looking from above. Here in the middle of this field. You've got the Air Force. The Air Force is one of their larger military branches. And then you've got their Navy, which has a bunch of submarines. A lot of them not totally operable, experts think. But in a recent video we made on submarines, we calculated at least 36 operable submarines hanging out in bases like this. Now look at their missile site.
they probably malfunction.
Missiles,
there's no capital so
rockets, nuclear weapons are a big deal for this regime, especially the most recent leader, who, as you can see from this graph, has really ramped up the testing of all of this. These missiles have all kinds of different ranges, but the longest ones can go 12,000 kilometers away. I mean, that puts a lot of the world in range, including the United States. Many of those are up here in these mountain bases, where they store these missiles and where they can launch them. But lately, they've also been trying to send up non-weapons into space. This launch pad is where, over the last couple of years, they've tried to put satellites up into space.
It's put a satellite in orbit. There's only about 11 or 12 countries around the world that have ever put a satellite in orbit.
The military is core to keeping the Kims in power, which is why they often show it off. I love this video from The Guardian.
So one person message up the ZZ.
They know when one of these things is going to happen because there's like a replica of the Kim Il-sung Square, the big central square, where all of these soldiers get together and practice. And so whenever they see activity in that practice square, they know that they're getting ready for one of these. So the military is a very important part of keeping the Kims in power. It's used as propaganda, it's used as actual defense, and it's often used to actually like build stuff. And you've got one of the largest militaries in the world, 1 million plus active duty. They're able to command that to do all sorts of projects, including construction projects, which we're gonna look at. One thing you'll see a lot of in North Korea is fences, and not to necessarily keep people from coming in, but more so to keep people from going out. They've spent years building a fence around the entire perimeter of the country, at least 1,400 kilometers, bordering China alone. Here's all the security outposts. I mean, this fencing goes through all kinds of terrain, including dug into the beach. And a lot of this was built recently, as more and more people have been trying to escape. And then within the country itself, there are barriers that control people's movement. The country has checkpoints at the province borders to make sure people aren't moving around without permission. So yeah, a lot of people can't get out of North Korea, but some can. In fact, there's a whole network of IT professionals, North Korean like engineers, who interview for Western tech jobs, get hired, and then pass money and information back to the North Korean regime, all without their employer knowing it.
Okay, I'm about to try to conduct a job interview for the
So there's a snitching.
first time in my life. I reached out to David Wensky, a senior software engineer, and he responded to me 3 hours after I reached out, but I'm not actually hiring anybody. And I don't think David Wensky is actually who he says he is.
This is a big rabbit hole that is very juicy, and my colleague Christoph went down that rabbit hole in a new video that's live right now over on his channel. His show is called Tunnel Vision. It is very good, and this story about IT espionage and money funneling back to North Korea is incredibly wild, how deep Christoph was able to get. So you should go check that out. The link is in the description. Okay, so a lot of this stuff probably isn't that surprising to you. This is the kind of stuff we see on the news, the stuff that gets covered a lot, the military, the missiles, the control. But now I want to get to the part of this country that really led me to this video in the first place, which is the stuff that we don't see very often, to try to expand my understanding of what it is like to live in North Korea. What is life like in these cities, out here in the rural areas? How do they make stuff? Where do they get their food? Entertainment, community. Turns out that between defector testimony, state news, and the satellite map, you can actually learn a lot about this stuff. A lot of North Korea's cities were designed from scratch after the city was turned into rubble because of the Korean War. And because of that, they have very unique design that is meant to fulfill a certain objective that is in line with North Korean ideals of controlling people, unifying people, and continuously celebrating their leaders and the struggle of their continuous revolution. So many of us have seen the capital, we'll get to that, but I want to look at these other cities. A lot of North Korean cities are built around a big central square like this. A lot of them have these circles that look like they're hand-drawn. The square is kind of the middle of the city, and then you have these massive boulevards that kind of frame out the city. Now you'll quickly notice in a lot of these cities that these boulevards are pretty empty. You see a lot more buses than you see private cars. Oh, and you see a mosque every once in a while. I've tried to get to the bottom of what the deal is with these
Just recently updated map.
mosques. North Korea has a couple of these churches or mosques that are mostly there for optics, from what I can tell. More on that in a little bit. So you've got these empty boulevards, lots of empty squares that lead to these kind of grand spaces. Now, these spaces are often punctuated with some kind of monument. Here's one. Here we go, Central Square. I mean, we can go back in time too and sort of look at the historical imagery. Huge boulevards, often very empty. Oh, boom, look, someone's visiting. So when you see people, you often see them in huge groups like this. At least that's what I've noticed from above. When there's people, there's a lot of them and they're all very close. But oftentimes this stuff is empty. Oh, look, here's a bunch of people lined up in near perfect geometry on this square. Every major city has a stadium. Now, some of these are in kind of bad shape, but some are really nice. Sports is a big deal in North Korea.
Some of the sports that are popular in North Korea, they do very well. So they're definitely, in some areas, sort of hitting above their weight, I think.
Though defectors do report that sometimes a stadium like this one in particular has been used for public executions or public shamings. A big part of the control regime in North Korea is to publicly punish to keep people in line. Okay, and then recently the government declared that every city
Just like Gladiator.
needs to have one of these. Check this out. There are around 170 of these traffic parks, and these are new, but these are very important to North Korean cities. Remember all those empty streets? Like, most people don't own cars in North Korea. They go on buses. But recently that's kind of changing. There's even a car company that puts together like kit cars and sells them in North Korea. They're one of the few companies that actually advertise. And so because of that, there is more traffic in residential areas, which has led to more accidents for kids who are not used to dealing with cars. So this was an initiative to teach kids the rules of traffic to promote public safety for children. One thing that's going on. Okay, so those are some of the design patterns and kind of common ingredients in North Korean city.
Yeah, toy car, actual car.
Let me show you some specific cities, because as we do that, you start to see how this country works, how its economy works. Hamhung is one of their bigger cities. You've got your standard big, giant, empty squares with statues of the leaders. But this is actually a big economic hub for chemicals. Here's an area that some experts believe is a chemical facility where they actually store this stuff underground. Remember how they love to put everything underground to protect it? These little white dots sort of represent that there is something buried there, and potentially chemical weapons or other sensitive chemicals that they don't want the world to know about. See these big industrial facilities. They make a lot of chemicals like fertilizer, pesticides. It's home to this pretty wild-looking amusement park. I don't know what is going on with these slides. Now, I've never seen it full of people, even when I go to a weekday in the summer. But I want to show you this one factory. This is a really important building in North Korea because this is
empty park, that's suspicious.
where they make vinylon. Vinylon is a fabric that you can make not with wool or cotton, but with coal and limestone, which is something they have a lot of in North Korea. So as a part of the push for self-reliance, North Korea produces this synthetic material called vinylon. They use it for uniforms. Like a lot of clothing in North Korea is made with this really tough, scratchy, durable vinylon material. They use it for curtains. They kind of use it for everything. It's the North Korean national fabric. So this is their biggest vinylon factory right here. And it's so important that the leader came to the reopening when they renovated this thing. So yeah, vinylon is made with coal. They mine a lot of coal in North Korea. If you zoom into this port in Hamhung, you'll see really gnarly looking yellow pollution. But you'll also see ships with coal aboard. You'll see all this coal getting ready to be shipped out, basically all of it going to China and potentially violating sanctions, but that's not what we're looking into right now. Let's go to another city, but this one is interesting. It's up north, right in the shadow of Mount Paektu. This is a nice looking city. It's home to this ice rink. It's got a ski hill up here. There's of course the required children's traffic park. This was a big construction project for Kim Il-sung, and it's meant to show the world that North Korea is open for tourism, especially here in the shadow of their holy mountain. And look, this thing went up really fast. There's evidence
Yeah, I'm good, bruh.
that to make this thing go so fast, they used this youth construction brigade, which is a bunch of young people who do construction labor for 10 to 12 hours a day as a way to show their loyalty to the party and potentially move up in the ranks to move out of their social class, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit.
This district was pretty much empty before it started, and in the space of within a couple of years, or even a year, all of this was built. We don't know much about construction standards, but they do build very fast.
But yeah, when you control every human in the country, you can build this stuff really quick. Now, whether or not this is good quality stuff is another question. I've seen videos of some of these houses in the mountains that have ice on the inside of the window. So we're not sure if this is, good construction, but boy, they're building stuff fast. Okay, let me show you a few more of these cities. Okay, let's go to Chongjin, port city here on the East Coast. There's some gnarly industrial stuff going on here. Home to these very cookie cutter looking homes. Here they produce textiles, rubber, steel. They build trains. They've got a big power plant. And you can see out here in the water, this is where a lot of shipping comes in and out of the country. Look at all these vessels. I mean, not a lot relative to most countries, but got all this gnarly industrial stuff doing steel. You can see that they're shipping stuff out. There's coal, some of these minerals. A lot of mining happens, which, as we will see, usually is the work of political prisoners deep in the mountains working a life sentence of hard labor. But yeah, for now, let's just look at this. I mean, some of this stuff just looks like a wasteland, but that's industry for you. But then all of that steel production is
Basically slabs, I guess.
happening right next to these tightly packed homes, just endless homes. You've got your required empty boulevard, traffic park. Here's their train station. Here's the big central square. This one's really ornately designed. Let's see if anything happens if we go back in time. Oh, they just built this. This is 2020. Look at this thing go up. Looks nice. Statues of the two leaders, sports stadium. And if you look at these big blue roofs, you will see something that you wouldn't expect to see in North Korea. This is the home to a market where thousands of vendors buy and sell things all day here in the socialist, communist, anti-capitalist utopia of North Korea. So the story here is that back in the 90s, when the Soviet Union fell, North Korea was hit very hard because they were very reliant on aid from the Soviet Union. Mass famine spread throughout the whole country, and this region was very deeply hit. So it gave rise to this really resourceful black market. Homemade goods, smuggled goods, sort of bartering, trading. Between a couple 100,000 to a couple million people died during this famine. And the black market was the only way that a lot of people lived and still live today. So in 2008, the government tried to crack down on this. This is very anti-North Korean, letting people buy and sell and smuggle stuff in. This is not North Korean. So they cracked down, and the mostly women merchants in this city protested. You don't see that in North Korea. They marched to the city government office, and there was a big confrontation, and they basically said we won't be able to live.
You can protest in North Korea. I didn't know that.
Where North Korea started to change has been the sort of underground economy. It has become somewhat tolerated under Kim Jong-un, these kind of illicit markets.
And today, the government continues to let this happen. This one we're looking at with the blue roof is a big example of that, but it's not the only one, not even close. These markets are now all over the country. So a lot of people get their stuff on this kind of black, gray, informal market, which has turned into a massive network of trafficking stuff in, usually from China and almost always illegally.
Individual smugglers that will bring stuff literally across the river that divides North Korea and China. Sometimes those trading companies will, in the back of the truck, in addition to the shipment they're meant to be bring a few other things in as well. And then that will kind of flow into the black market that way.
Back in the famine days, it was just the essentials. It was just rice and corn, just basic food. But with time, it started to become a more sophisticated private market. And today, you can get all kinds of cheap Chinese products. I mean, China is like the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, and they are right there next to North Korea. There's a lot of ships and trucks coming back and forth between the two countries, which serves as the arteries for this black market. A lot of these goods end up in these markets. Here's one in Pyongyang. There's a part of me that wants to do a whole video on these markets because they are very interesting. The whole informal economy of North Korea is something I might do a video on. If you're interested in that, let me know, because man, I want to pull on that thread. But real quick, there's two things that I feel like I'm learning about North Korea because of this informal market system. Number one, North Korea's very survival is thanks to the presence of China. China, this massive manufacturer, rapidly developing country, is a lifeline for North Korea, both in the
They are right next to each other.
formal trade as well as the informal black
Of
market. And
course, they are going to trap.
the second thing that this kind of confirms for me is just how much the centrally planned communist government does not work. It does not actually work to allocate goods and services to the people. This country would not be able to survive without the black market. So in addition to China, the black market is the only way that a lot of North Koreans survive. But you can see how risky this can become, these informal markets, because the regime only works because it controls every aspect of people's lives. So these black markets are relinquishing some of that control. So every once in a while, they crack down, they go in, they like break up the markets, they make sure to extract fees, they make sure that this doesn't get too out of control. Anyway, the markets are endlessly fascinating. One other thing you see in Chongqing is up here. This is a prison camp. Prison camps always have economic activity attached to them. And further up the valley, you've got this re-education camp deep in the valley for anyone who shows disloyalty to the regime. This one's
So
for
this is what Hassan wants to do.
over 1,000 men.
Re-education camp.
Don't live in these homes. That's for like the officials. They live within these walls and they spend their time mining copper and iron, cutting logs, making bricks, and farming. This is where we should talk about the prison camps, because this one that we just saw in the city, there's a lot of those. They exist in cities. Some are just typical prisons. Some are re-education camps. But there are way bigger ones, and they're up in the mountains, and they represent what I see as the most egregious version of North Korea's many human rights abuses. What's happening inside of these shapes is some of the worst stuff we can imagine. This is pretty upsetting stuff. I'm not going to go into like super detail, but let me just show you these 4 major prison camps, where they are, what they have inside of them, and who gets sent to them, and why and how, and everything we know. You get sent to a prison camp for kind of anything. If you show any rebellion or disrespect to the party or the leader, if you're a public official who messed something up, you get sent to one of these. Just being accused of wrong thinking can get you sent to one. And it's not just you and your family, it is also your children and your grandchildren that aren't even born yet. This system detains multiple
The whole bloodline.
generations of someone they've deemed a political prisoner. Now, officially, none of this exists. North Korea laughably says that they do not have any such political prison system, but here they
There's
are.
actually around 700 penal facilities. Okay, now that goes from short-term detention sites, that you're there for a weekend, to those massive, 50,000 people concentration camp style sites.
And they have these names like Camp 14, Camp 11, and they're often on these huge tracts of land. Here's one up in the north. Like, this is like, we're deep in the mountains here. Like, look at this. This is the prison camp. There are guard posts and fences. Some of these aren't completely fenced in 100%, but like, if you look closely, you will see fences here cut into this forest. If you look real close, you can see a guard post. And within these camps, not just adults, you've got a lot of children. Many of them were born in the camp. They know nothing different. And what you'll see inside these prison camps is a lot of economic, productive activity being done through forced hard labor. So like
They actually slept, so
here you've got this coal mine. That's a big one. That's one of the reasons all this stuff's in the mountains. Then you have a lot of farmland up here as well. Livestock. There's even a distillery here, maybe making some kind of hard alcohol to be shipped to Pyongyang. Got a factory here. You've got a school, probably for the guards' children. The children in these camps are made to work from the time they are 4 to 6 years old. And the work hours are 10 to 12 hours long for everyone in this camp. Unpaid, forced prison labor. The conditions are horrific. People are on the verge of starving and often have to fight for resources. But you'll also see that even within these prison camps, it kind of feels like a North Korean city. It's like a little microcosm, a little mini version of the North Korean cities. Like, look, you've got a central square with a monument. You'll see murals of the great leaders. You'll have these indoctrination centers, a school. I want to know more about these schools. It's like a little mini city. These big ones, there's like 20,000 people who will live here. They are fenced in for the most part. Most people who come into this prison camp never leave. The people who are born here will never leave. These are life sentences, and it really gets its roots from the old Soviet days, where so much control and power was wrought from just having the threat of this thing that the UN has called a human rights abuse with no parallel in modern times. Like, this is a level of control
UN doesn't do any shit, so
and deprivation that doesn't really exist anywhere close to this degree.
20 odd million people that are basically prisoners to a system that they can't change.
This is kind of like a condensed version of that, a prison within a prison. Now, there's obviously a lot more study that's been done and visual analysis from satellite imagery. In our sources, you can read some of the human rights groups' reports on this, where they've done sort of a deep dive and annotation. I've just done a quick overview here. And to contrast the prison camps, let's go to Wonsan, where I found one of Kim Jong-un's palaces. We can really show you what Kim Jong-un does with this power that he's extracted from his people. This is Wonsan, and up here, you got your empty square with the circles, you got a port. Then up here, you've got this international children's camp where kids from all around the world come to partake in North Korean fun and sport every year. And then right here is the Kim family compound. Look at this, right on the beach. It's got this private beach with all kinds of security barriers. It's got all of these massive
And the whole thing.
structures, big yard, a shooting range, and right here next to it, of course, a railroad just in case the guy has to scurry away in case of an invasion or something. So he's always got an escape plan. So while the 100,000 North Koreans are imprisoned up in the mountains, Kim Jong-un has his residence here on the beach. You know, I've known this, I've known that North Korea is crazy, but to see the prison camps and then to see this is just, it's fairly sickening to me. So when you're out here in rural North Korea, like I've been a lot lately, you stumble upon a few weird things. Check this out. Like you'll get this, like, this looks like maybe an anti-aircraft battery, like a military installation. Maybe you're in this red earth. Then you get these like really peculiar looking housing blocks that are just eerily symmetrical. They're kind of everywhere out in the rural area, and they are often built next to a farm. I've never seen villages like this anywhere in the world from the sky. They're just so clearly deeply planned. But what I'm learning is that this is how a lot of stuff gets made in rural North Korea, a lot of the farming. Like, look at this. See all these houses? All of these houses, which look identical to each other, they're all a part of this factory. This is a factory that makes, let's find out. Boom, there we go, fruit. This is a fruit processing factory out here, way out in rural North Korea. And all of these homes are the people who work in the fruit factory. Something Jacob pointed out to me is that a lot of these are duplexes, meaning two families live here, and you can see this is their backyard, and they have kind of a separator. So they have this little plot of backyard. This is their community. You are assigned a job here, and you work here. I don't see a car anywhere on these roads.
You mentioned cars. Of course, private ownership of vehicles isn't really a thing in North Korea, so there's no need for parking spaces.
You are living here and working here for your whole life. See some people biking, some people walking. But the other thing you see are these vast complexes of greenhouses. Kim Jong-un has been going nuts on greenhouses, building as many as he can. This was an airport for some reason.
I mean, they can own a bicycle, right?
But over time, this airport got turned into a massive greenhouse complex. Kim Jong-un has been doing this. And in fact, just a short time, this is 2022. And this is today. Like, man, they build stuff fast, it seems. So one way that North Korea works is by just assigning people jobs and having them live and work in the exact same place. But man, I get really mesmerized out here in rural North Korea looking at the configuration of the housing. Okay, but we have to talk about the capital. I know everyone's wondering, like, the capital, it's the most interesting. I've been holding off because I feel like the capital gets so much coverage, and I'm interested in like these rural, like, backwaters. But let's talk about the capital. In order to understand Pyongyang and like what it is, you have to understand this concept of songbun, basically the caste system for North Korea. It's how they subdivide the people. And like once you're in one class, you're in one class, and like your kids are in that class too, and you can maybe move up or maybe move down. If your grandpa was like supportive of the Japanese or wasn't super loyal during the revolution, then you are a part of the hostile class. Like you are not to be trusted, you are not loyal, you will have the worst jobs, the worst opportunities, you'll get the worst punishments. The wavering class are kind of the middle ground, and they are more trusted. They're still on thin ice like everyone, but they have more opportunities, they get better healthcare, they get better
Third class.
schools, better food. But the core class, those are the top dogs. They're party officials, they're the elites. Those are the people who live in Pyongyang. They live in a completely different world than the rest of the country. The capital, which is a pretty wild looking place. Here on Google Earth, they've put these little 3D renderings of like the big super wild hotel at the center of town that actually looks really awesome and cool and wild, but it's totally empty. At least that's what the reports say. It's just a big piece of propaganda. Part of it is that with these buildings, because electricity is so flaky in North Korea, you actually don't want like a high-rise like penthouse, because if you're like at the 30th floor and the power goes out, you're walking 30 floors of steps. So the most desirable apartments, according to Martin, the expert interviewed, are the ones on the bottom floors. Okay, so Pyongyang has big old stadium, monuments, big grand boulevards, lots of buses. So much transportation happens on buses in North Korea. And as you're rolling around here, you see a lot of like pretty peculiar architecture.
A throwback to Soviet era when cities were laid out on a template and you had, brutalist architecture and everything in just rows of apartments and no real like suburban landscape.
Now these theme parks are empty parking lots all the time. It is like, just a snapshot in time. So we don't actually know, but I've never seen any one of these. Although, check out this promo video from this water park. You start to see that like a lot of this stuff is built to show the outside world that North Korea can do this, and to show fellow North Koreans that
Okay.
can do this. That is a massive part of construction in this country.
Just an advertisement.
It's not about serving the broader people as much as it is about telling a story. So many sports, like sports are a big part of North Korean culture. Kim Jong-un's got his little signature buildings here. Every leader has a different style, and Kim Jong-un is just doing it with these curvy apartment buildings. One thing you see here is churches. There's a bunch of random churches in Pyongyang. One of them is this Eastern Orthodox church, which North Korea built for their good friend Russia. Here's Vladimir Putin in this Eastern Orthodox church. Oh, but here's a Protestant one. Founder of the country, Kim Il-sung, had a mother who was a Protestant. And apparently she was a deacon here in this church. So they restored this church, and it's sort of like a symbol that, like, look, North Korea believes in freedom of religion. But they, to be clear, do not. Religion is not widely practiced in North Korea for obvious reasons. Now, what I love about Pyongyang is it takes the whole, like, big boulevard, grand streets that are empty to a whole new level. I mean, look at this. Here's where the great leader used to live. This was their palace. And coming off it is this big, grand square, empty. And coming off that, there's this grand boulevard that is just so grand and so empty. It goes down through this big, beautiful roundabout, keeps going through a tunnel to another big, beautiful, mostly empty roundabout. There's a car. And now it enters into this massive grand, like, this is, you would expect a urban design like this in like Mexico City or something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lanes going into this grand intersection for the
10 lane and no one is here.
4 cars that are here. I mean, it's mesmerizing to look at, right? So anyway, that is the grand boulevard that leads up to this palace that the leaders used to live in. The leaders don't live here anymore now. Kim Jong-un lives instead up here. See if I can find his house from memory now that I've been
Where
staring
they can do the sports car in there.
at it nonstop. Boom, there it is. Found it. Okay, here he is. He lives up in this big compound up on the hill. This big boy. This is his main residence in the city. I'm looking at my data set from Jacob, and you see potential underground entrances to these heavily secured compounds and bunkers. For how much we know these folks like to dig, you can imagine that behind Kim Jong-un's house, there are tunnels and bunkers. We don't know that, but I presume there probably is. Now, Google Maps being what it is, someone put a concentration center label right over the hill from Kim Jong-un's house. I asked the experts about this, and they're like, no, that's not a there's not a concentration camp on the other side of Kim Jong-un's house. It's probably a barracks where his bodyguards live. Don't believe everything you see on Google Maps, folks. So yeah, Pyongyang is a place that could look fairly developed and nice. And indeed, the imagery from Pyongyang does look fairly nice in some views, because this is where the elite live, the core class. This is where the output from all of the horrific abuse and slavery that's happening out in the countryside comes to benefit. And this is the center of power for the regime. Oh, and something you can't see here, but that you see in a lot of like tourist videos, is the very deep underground train system. They've got a subway that is very nice looking. And boy, I wish I could go there and visit and see it someday, but I probably will never do that for obvious reasons.
Why not?
Okay, I want to finish this video talking about the thing we can't really see on this map, which is the people.
They are regular people like you and I, and they have dreams and ambitions. They just want to have some food and enjoy themselves and go out with friends and just kind of have a happy life.
Despite all the horrors of this place, there are wholesome, meaningful traditions
Can they go out the country though?
and rituals
and
that
live?
still endure. The Lunar New Year, or the Harvest Festival, brings people together to celebrate. The extreme poverty limits their feasts, but they often consist of homemade alcohol, simple rice cakes, and something poverty and totalitarianism can't totally take away, which is community. The nourishment of relationships. As we've seen, most people can't really move around in the country, so they stay in one place, which defectors have reported leads to a sense of intimacy and connection with the community they live next to. They lean on each other, they survive because of each other, they celebrate together, and they seem to find meaning despite all the limitations and all of the control. One defector went so far as to say, everything was suffocating and pitiful in North Korea, but it is a country that I have many positive memories from. So if someone asks me, what is North Korea like? I say, North Korea is a nice place with plenty of love.
And that's, I think, one of the things that's often forgotten when we look at North Korea in the traditional media, because people having a happy life is not newsworthy, but a military parade or a nuclear test or a missile launch or something is newsworthy.
So just leaving you with a reminder that there's more to this country than the horrible realities that we've seen here or that we often see on the news. If you want a deeper look on this angle of the country, there's a book called Nothing to Envy, which is a great human level account of life in North Korea. So thank you all for being curious with me as we looked at this map to understand more about this secretive country. Let me know what you want me to
So
cover
what you're born into is actually very important, I
next,
guess.
and I'll see you in the next one.